4:52 a.m., March 28, 1945, near the Rhine River. A pale dawn creeps over the muddy hillside as Private First Class Daniel Mercer pulls on his damp gloves and checks the folded orders tucked into his breast pocket. His lieutenant points toward a narrow farm road cutting between two hedgerows. "Take this message to Battalion HQ. Stay low. Don't get seen." Mercer nods, steps off the embankment, and disappears into the cold mist. The sky grows lighter by the second, revealing faint tire tracks in the mud. A distant rumble vibrates the ground, engines, somewhere unseen. Then faint figures appear through the fog, many of them. They thought they had understood the war, but what they saw changed everything. The countryside feels frozen in time. A soft haze hangs over the fields, blurring the edges of barns and fence lines. Birds are silent. Even the wind seems to hold itself still. Every step Mercer takes leaves a shallow print in the morning dew. Behind him, his unit waits in quiet anticipation. Helmets rest on knees. Canteens hang loosely from belts. Someone pours a cup of lukewarm, instant coffee, the smell drifting briefly through the air before fading into the fog. A medic checks his watch, tapping the glass as if urging the moment to move faster. Mercer adjusts the straps on his gear and keeps walking. His breath forms small clouds in the cold. The horizon brightens just enough to reveal outlines of trees. Somewhere deep in the mist, a metallic clatter echoes, soft but deliberate. He pauses, listening. Footsteps, equipment. The sound fades, replaced by the low hum of engines idling behind a distant hill. He presses forward, feeling the weight of the folded message in his pocket. The war may be nearly won, but the countryside remains full of uncertainty. Every hedge, every bend, every shadow holding the possibility of surprise. Mercer had every reason to believe the road ahead was safe. The previous night, Allied armor crossed the Rhine, pushing scattered German units into full retreat. Intelligence reports suggested resistance in this sector had collapsed. Battalion staff estimated only small pockets of disorganized troops remained. The logic seemed strong. Bridges behind the Germans had been blown. Supply lines were severed. Many units lacked fuel. Morale was reportedly low. Engineers moving through the area earlier saw nothing significant. Civilian reports claimed German forces had abandoned the nearby villages. Even the distant artillery had quieted, replaced by the occasional thump of Allied trucks repositioning. Mercer himself assumed the mission would take less than an hour. Deliver the message, return by the same road, eat breakfast before the sun fully rose. No surprises, no complications. He moved down the path believing the war was winding down, that the last days would bring fewer dangers than the months behind him. The morning fog felt like a curtain slowly lifting on a final act. Calm, predictable, nearly routine. But as he reached the crest of a small rise, the illusion cracked. Shapes emerged, silhouettes against the glowing mist, moving with purpose. Not stragglers, not villagers. A column, multiple rows, equipment-laden, organized, advancing. Mercer crouched behind a stone wall, heart pounding. Whatever this formation was, it contradicted every report he'd heard. But beneath the triumph, the first cracks had already formed. Mercer presses himself flat against the stone wall, peering through a narrow gap. The silhouettes sharpen. Men marching in loose formation, packs slung over their shoulders, helmets reflecting pale sun. More figures appear behind them. Dozens, then more than dozens. He wipes dew from the wall with his sleeve and looks again. A lead officer with field binoculars, a radio operator carrying a large backpack unit, a wagon of supplies hitched behind a truck with low fuel growl, soldiers walking with purposeful but weary steps. This is not a broken remnant. This is a retreating company, maybe larger. He ducks lower as another vehicle rumbles forward. A second truck, then a third. He counts quickly. 10, 15, 20. His breath shortens. A full convoy. He glances back at the path he came from. No cover, no backup, no easy escape. The message in his pocket suddenly feels irrelevant. The situation has changed completely. The lead officer halts his men. He scans the road ahead. Mercer stiffens. If he stands, he's seen. If he runs, he's heard. He makes a decision. He steps onto the road, not in panic, not in haste, but with the command presence of someone meant to be there. The officer spots him immediately. He raises a hand, calling the column to stop. Tires grind lightly against gravel. Footsteps fall into silence. Mercer stands tall, calm, one hand raised in a controlled signal. Halt. Move aside. Await instructions. His confidence is the illusion. The German officer approaches slowly, confusion flickering across his face. Mercer taps the officer's truck, pointing backward toward the fog as if indicating an entire Allied formation just out of sight. The officer hesitates. He whispers to the radio operator. Mercer hears fragments. Voraus, Canadians, blockiert, more further ahead. The radio operator nods. Uncertainty spreads like ripples down the column. Soldiers shift nervously, glancing toward the hedgerows, expecting a company to appear at any moment. Mercer sharpens the illusion. He gestures firmly. Out of the vehicles, gather near the ditch, no sudden moves. The officer complies. One man complies, then 2, then 20. Soon entire groups step out, hands raised halfway, not surrender, but caution. Mercer climbs onto the lead truck. His elevated stance reinforces the authority they already believe he has. He signals more sharply. Now they do surrender. Not to him. To the force they think surrounds them. Men begin stacking rifles. Others form lines. Someone signals to trucks in the rear, and even more troops pour into view. The column seems endless. Later estimates report the count, nearly 300 men, captured by a single soldier with a message in his pocket. Silence follows, and in that silence, truth becomes undeniable. The scene is surreal. Rows of German troops stand quietly in the morning haze, their breath forming thin clouds. Some glance toward the tree line, expecting Allied reinforcements to emerge. Others look at Mercer with a mix of confusion and resignation. Mercer himself stands rigid, heart pounding beneath his gear. His palms sweat inside his gloves, but his posture remains steady. Because if he falters, the entire illusion falters. A German officer steps forward, older, exhausted, uniform worn at the seams. His voice is low, respectful. How many are with you? Mercer lets a long silence stretch. He looks past the officer, toward the fog-covered path leading back to his unit. He doesn't say a number. He simply raises 2 fingers and points behind him. Reinforcements arriving soon. The officer nods gravely. Mercer exhales slowly. The realization settles. They've accepted it. He has done the impossible. The only thing left is to manage the situation without breaking the fragile belief holding it together. He walks the line slowly, checking for radios, watching for sudden movements. The prisoners remain remarkably cooperative. The word spreads. They've been intercepted by advance scouts of a larger Canadian battalion. As he passes, a younger soldier whispers, a mix of fear and relief. Krieg ist vorbei. The war is over. Mercer pauses. He understands now. They're not resisting because they're weak. They're done. Done marching, done fighting, done fleeing. They were waiting for someone, anyone, to accept their surrender. He just happened to be the one they found. He turns to the radio truck, flicks the switch to disable outgoing calls, then steps back onto the road. He lifts his arm, pointing the entire group toward the ridge where his unit waits. Move, he says calmly. 300 soldiers begin walking, orderly, quietly, along the same path he took alone less than an hour earlier. As the line stretches across the field, Mercer feels a wave of disbelief wash over him. A simple message run has become a moment he will question for years. But deep down, beneath the shock and adrenaline, a final truth settles. He knew it then. Not might be lost, was lost. Not the prisoners, not the column, but the last illusions of the war. They surrendered not to him, but to the end they knew had already arrived. Mercer's extraordinary capture wasn't chance, luck, or myth. It was the predictable outcome of deeper forces shaping the final weeks of the war. Forces invisible, but overwhelming. The first mechanism was mental exhaustion. German troops had been retreating for weeks. Little food, no secure supply lines, constant pressure. When soldiers reach that level of fatigue, even small symbols of authority appear larger. The second mechanism was information collapse. Radio networks were unreliable. Orders were contradictory. Rumors spread faster than facts. Units didn't know where friendly forces were, let alone the enemy. Ambiguity breeds surrender. The third mechanism was geographic disorientation. Fog, shifting front lines, and improvised routes created the perfect environment for misinterpretation. To the convoy, Mercer's confident posture signaled an organized ambush. The fourth mechanism was operational panic. German officers in 1945 were trained to avoid encirclement at all costs. Mercer's position, alone on a road, looked exactly like a forward control point of a larger blocking force. The fifth mechanism was Allied psychological dominance. By this stage in the war, Allied forces moved quickly and decisively. German troops assumed any encounter would involve a much larger force than they could see. The sixth mechanism was group conformity. Once the lead officer complied, the entire column followed. Surrender often spreads socially. When one group accepts reality, others imitate. The seventh mechanism was symbolic authority. Mercer's hand gestures, posture, and calm voice created an impression of leadership. Soldiers respond to confidence, especially when unsure of their own situation. The eighth mechanism was the collapse of hope. These troops were not eager to keep fighting. Many were older reservists, support crew, or young recruits. They were waiting for a chance to give up safely. And the final mechanism was timing. Mercer arrived at the precise moment when the convoy's morale dipped below its willingness to resist. A different minute, a different officer, a different angle, and the outcome might have been reversed. Understanding these mechanisms reveals a larger truth. Wars are not won only by force. They are shaped by fatigue, confusion, perception, and the fragile psychology of groups under stress. Mercer didn't overpower 300 men. He stepped into a moment where they were already leaning toward surrender and gave them something solid to lean into. His courage mattered, but the collapse around him mattered just as much. This is why the event stands out, because it was not just tactical, it was systemic. A single soldier became the tipping point in a situation built by months of pressure. When Mercer finally returned to his unit, the sun had fully risen over the fields, casting long shadows across the damp earth. His fellow soldiers looked up from their positions, expecting him to return alone. What they saw instead was something almost surreal. A long, winding column of German troops marching quietly behind him, hands raised slightly, heads lowered in relief. 300 men, one escort. A sergeant dropped his canteen in disbelief. A radio operator froze mid-sentence. Even the lieutenant who had sent Mercer out could only stare in stunned silence. The surrender was processed methodically. The prisoners sat in orderly rows as Allied troops guided them toward collection points. Some whispered to each other that they had been intercepted by elite scouts. Others simply sighed with relief, thankful the war was ending in custody rather than chaos. As the hours passed, reinforcements swept the region. More German units surrendered. Villagers emerged cautiously from their homes. Officers marked surrendered equipment on maps. Mercer finally delivered the message he had set out with, now wrinkled, sweat-stained, and almost irrelevant. But his unexpected achievement echoed far beyond that morning. It showed how fragile collapsing armies become, how surrender can spread like a quiet tide, how confidence, real or perceived, can reshape outcomes, and how a single soldier walking a foggy road can alter the course of events without firing a shot. Historians later wrote about the incident with reserved astonishment. No dramatic gunfight, no heroic charge, just timing, presence, and the psychological weight of a war in its final act. And the verdict of history remains. Wars are not lost in battle. They are lost in decisions made long before. And sometimes, a single message runner returns with a truth greater than any order he carried.